Hello, I'm Sharon Carr. I'm a storyteller. The story I'm going to tell you is based on an old English tale called The Old Man in the White House. I first heard this tale from Kat Wetherall, who's a professional storyteller and writer. The way she told it was mesmerizing and it was atmospheric. It stayed with me ever since. And like Kat, I've substituted the old man in the title of the story with an old woman. So let's begin our story. There was much gossip in the village about her, that old woman who lived in the White House on the edge of the wild woods. Oh, people said, don't know what it is about her, but she makes my flesh creep. And they avoided her as much as possible. But if their paths crossed, she would stand her ground. And she'd look right through them with that gaze, that piercing gaze. She was a tall, thin, gaunt-looking woman, and although elderly and her face was much lined and wrinkled, the skin was pulled so tight that from a certain angle it resembled a skull. People avoided her as much as possible, but behind her back they called her the odd one. And while they knew of her, they did not know where she came from or who she really was. But the odd one, who lived in the White House on the edge of the wild woods, she knew them, each and every person who lived in that village. She knew their needs, their desires, their secrets. On the other side of the village, there lived a little girl called Sally. She lived with her widowed mother in a little thatch-roof cottage with a bright red door, and Sally had not a care in the world. She had bubbles in her curls, merriment in her eye, and laughter in her voice. And she loved to play, to skip, to dance, and to sing. Whatever promises Sally made, oh, she'd fritter them all away, because Sally could never be trusted to keep her word. Sally's mother, though, had all the cares of the world on her shoulders. She'd been widowed young and had had to bring up her daughter all by herself. And there was a hesitation in Sally's mother about her daughter. She loved Sally very much, but she knew that Sally could not be trusted to keep a promise. And it was coming up to Sally's birthday. Sally's mother wanted to give her a very special gift, something that her own mother, Sally's grandmother, had given her at the same age just before she had passed away. A pair of bright yellow leather gloves, where on the back of each glove was stitched a garland of forget-me-nots, which Sally's grandmother had done for Sally's mother. Oh, the stitching was in bright coloured threads of bronze, gold, silver, red, and blue. And when Sally's mother had put on each glove, oh, the leather had felt so soft, and she'd loved the stitching, and she said, "Thank you, mother." And she cherished them even more when her mother passed away. Oh, she only wore them on special occasions, and she took care of those gloves. And she made a promise to herself that as she was growing up, she would give those gloves to her daughter if she had one. And she did, Sally. But she had that hesitation. Would Sally be trusted to keep those gloves, to cherish them as much as she had? On the day of Sally's birthday, she bounced out of bed and she skipped and she sang and she hopped and she bounced all the way down the stairs into the kitchen, where she saw on the kitchen table cards and presents from family and friends. and she saw at the place where she sat at the table, there, the pair of beautiful, bright yellow leather gloves with the stitching on the back. She dived for them. She put them on. Oh, the leather was so soft, and the stitching was so beautiful. "Thank you, Mother," said Sally. "Wait till I take them out to show my friends when I go to play." And then Sally looked at the expression on her mother's face. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "Oh, Sally," her mother said, "you cannot take those gloves out to play. You cannot show your friends. Those gloves were the last thing your grandmother, my mother, ever gave to me. Just before she passed away, I have looked after those gloves, Sally. I have cherished them. And I made the promise to myself as I was growing up that if I had a daughter like you, I would give them to her. Sally, you have to promise me that you will not take those gloves out to play to show your friends. Because if you lose one or damage one, I will be so disappointed in you. Promise me." Sally looked up at her mother. "I promise, Mommy, I promise." But when her mother's back was turned, Sally grabbed the gloves, she put them on, and she snuck out to play with her friends. When she showed them, "Oh, Sally, those gloves are beautiful. Look at the stitching. Come on, let's play." And they played, and they sang, and they danced, and they laughed. And they played, and they sang, and they danced, and they laughed. And they played, and they sang, and they... Sally suddenly realized she had lost one of those gloves. She went up to her friends. "Have you seen my glove?" "No, Sally, we haven't seen the glove." She went to all the places where they played. No glove. She went knocking on all the doors of the houses nearby. No glove. She went to the row of cottages where on the end was the great white house on the edge of the wild woods. She knocked on all the doors. No glove. And there she found herself, standing outside by the creaking black painted gate, looking up the pathway to the great white house with the black oak door and the window on either side, where the odd one lived. Oh, Sally did not want to go up that path. She did not want to knock on the door of the great white house. She did not want to see the odd one. But she had no choice. This was her last chance. So she took a great big breath. She creaked open the gate and she walked up the path. And as she did, she stopped halfway and looked at the window to the right of the great black oak door. She could have sworn she saw the curtain twitch. She swallowed hard and continued up the path. She walked up the stairs and the door was there in front of her. She swallowed hard, took hold of the great big door knocker, and she knocked it 1, 2, 3. And the sound of that knocker reverberated throughout the whole house. And Sally waited. And after a time, she heard a shuffling behind that door. She heard a bolt being drawn back, and the door opened silently into the blackness of the hall, where before her stood the odd one, looking down at her. "Yes, child," said the odd one, that gaze piercing right through her. "What do you want?" Sally swallowed and asked her if she'd possibly seen a bright yellow leather glove with some stitching on the back. She'd lost it. And the odd one, looking down at her, smiled, but there was no wound. "As a matter of fact, child, I have." she brought out from behind her back her hand where there lay the bright yellow leather glove. Oh, relief washed over Sally. "Thank you," she said, making to grab it, and the odd one snatched it away. "Oh, no, child. Oh, no. I won't give you back your glove until you make me a promise." Oh, anything," Sally said, "anything." "You have to promise me that you do not tell anyone where you got it from or who gave it to you. If you break your promise, I will come for you at midnight. Promise me." "I promise, I promise." Sally snatched the glove out of the odd one's hand. She thanked her, turned, ran down the stairs, up the path, through the creaking black painted gate, and all the way home, feeling relieved that her mother would never know. But villages are small places, and Sally had knocked on one too many doors. So by the time she went skipping into the hallway, when she got home, she knew her mother knew, just by the look on her mother's face. "Oh, I'm sorry," said Sally, who burst into tears. "I'm so sorry." And her mother just shook her head. "Oh, Sally, how could you break your promise to me? You said you would not take the gloves out to play with your friends, and now I've heard you've lost one. Oh, Sally, I'm so disappointed in you. Oh, Mom, Mother," and she brought out the two gloves. "Here, in my hands, here. I found it, I found it." Oh, and her mother smiled. "Oh, Sally, who found it for you?" And Sally looked away. "I can't say." Her mother became angry. "Why can't you say?" I promised." And her mother was furious. "So," she said, "you can break your promise to me, but you cannot break your promise to the other person who found that glove. Tell me, where did you find it, and who gave it to you?" And Sally burst into tears even more. "Oh, it was the odd one, it was the odd one. She found it. She made me promise that if I told anyone, she would come for me at midnight." And Sally's mother knew that you do not break your promise to the odd one. She gathered her daughter to her. She hugged her tight and said, "Don't worry, Sally. I will look after you. You will be safe. The odd one will not come for you." And after that, she locked the front door and the back door to the cottage. She put a chair underneath the doorknobs of each door. And then she shuttered all the doors, and for the rest of that afternoon into the evening, she sang songs to her daughter. She joked with her. She told her stories of when she'd been a little girl. But at the back of both their minds was that promise, that broken promise to the odd one. Towards 9 o'clock, Sally's mother put her to bed. And she sat on her daughter's bed and she stroked her daughter's hair and she sang her songs of magic and enchantment all around. And then, as the clock struck 9, she got up, bent down, kissed her daughter on the cheek and said, "Don't worry, Sally, love. You'll be safe. I'll lock your bedroom door. I'll see you tomorrow. Sleep tight. I love you." And Sally, in that bed, with the blankets wrapped tightly around her, watched her mother leave the room, close the door behind her. She heard the key being turned in the lock, and she heard her mother's steps as they went down the hallway towards the door of her bedroom, and a bedroom door shut. And silence descended on the house, and the darkness grew thick. And Sally waited in that bed, terror growing, her heart beating, waiting, fear. As the clock struck 10. The clock downstairs struck 11. And then the clock struck 12 midnight. Sally's heart began to beat. Heart beating, waiting, fear. Heart beating, waiting, fear. But the minutes ticked past 12 midnight, and nothing seemed to happen. And Sally, there in the bed, blankets wrapped tightly around her, began to feel some hope rising within her, that maybe the odd one was like her. Maybe she too broke her promises. Oh, and Sally felt that relief washing over her again. And as she did, she began to relax and drift off to sleep. Downstairs, in the silence, there was a creak. Sally became alert, listening hard in the darkness. She heard another creak, as if someone was slowly coming up the stairs. Sally's heart began to beat quickly, heart beating, waiting, fear. And then she heard a whispering, a muttering, a murmuring creeping up, up, up the stairs. Sally, I'm on the first step. It was the odd one in her bedroom. Her heart was beating, waiting, fear. The voice came again. Sally, I'm on the second step. She heard the step creak. I'm on the third step. The voice is getting slightly louder. Sally, I'm on the fourth step. Fifth step. Sixth step. Sally in her bedroom, waiting, her heart beating, waiting, fear, heart beating, waiting, fear. Sally, I'm on the seventh step, eighth step, ninth step. Sally, I'm on the 10th step. Sally, beating, heart beating, as she waited in that bed, terrified. Sally, I'm on the 11th step, 12th step. Sally, I'm outside your bedroom door. In Sally's bedroom, Sally waiting in her bed, heart beating, waiting, fear, heart beating, waiting, fear, heart beating, waiting, fear. Early next morning, at the crack of dawn, Sally's mother leapt out of bed. She tore open the door. She ran down the hallway. She put the key into the lock of her daughter's bedroom door and she fumbled around it. When she finally opened it and looked all around, there was no sign of Sally. Thank you for listening to my tale.